Good morning and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about paint. I've had a lot of comments and questions on the Facebook page and some of the groups about what materials I'm using, what process I'm using. So I thought I'd go over that a little bit today. For anyone new to the videos, I'm working on a 68 fastback. It's originally a J-Code 302 4-barrel car, a 3-speed manual with a 9-inch rear. It was wrecked and parked in the early 80s and set outside until 2012. In 2012 it was moved into a garage and it sat there until October of 18 when I bought the car. I've replaced pretty much all the metal on it. If you look back through some of the older videos, Mustang's Defeer full front long subframe and suspension, 2014 Gen 1 Coyote, 2003 Cobra T56 96 Cobra 8.8 rear with 373 gears. The quarters, the inner and outer wheelhouses, the trunk floor, the firewall, the full floor pan, the transition pan, the cowl, everything firewall forward, all new metal. Done a few custom things on top of your traditional Coyote swap. Moved the ECU into this little box here made by Mustang's Defeer behind the kick panel. That way the engine bay stays nice and clean. The color is a 2019 Audi Sonoma green. I looked into doing the bullet green, the new Mustang bullet green, and it was just too dark. It looked really nice in the sun, but in kind of low light like this, it just looked black. It was too dark. So this color, it's kind of hard to see. When the light hits it, it's just got a beautiful metallic. It's got a little bit of gold in it. Really nice color when the sun hits it. So spray-wise, for the last couple of days I've been working on the rockers, the door jambs, getting everything ready to spray. The reason I'm doing it this way is I want to hang the doors on the car and paint them together. That way I don't have any color match issues. Same with the fenders. I'll move the fenders a little further forward because I still need to paint the top of the cowl too, and I don't want that in the way. But usually I would just hang the doors, paint the front and the back of the doors together. That way you're not having to deal with masking off. And same with the car. But I'm afraid I'm not gonna get the right color match. You know, if they're not painted on the same day, if the weather's not the same, the humidity is not the same. As you can see, I don't have a professional paint booth here. I'm painting in my garage. So I have a lot of variables to deal with, and I just don't want to take a chance of the color not being right and having to repaint. So that's why I'm doing it this way. So materials wise, I've been a big fan of Nason's. I've been using their products for over 10 years now. I do use the Chroma base coat. They generally have more tints in them. You get a bit deeper color, but I've been really happy with the primer, the sealer, and the clear coat from Nason's. So what I've used on this car, primer wise, I will start off, I used Spee's epoxy primer on the entire car first when I got to bare metal, before any body work was done. Now that I'm into body work and sanding that primer, I've been using the Nason Select Prime. It uses the same hardener as the sealer, so not as much material to keep on the shelf. There's the Select Seal, again, same hardener. I use the Chroma base coat. There, and Nason's 465 clear, which has been some great stuff. I used 2 coats. Now in this car, I plan on doing the 2 coats, letting it sit for a little while, wet sanding the whole car, and then I'm going to do 2 more coats, just give it that real nice deep finish. So for those of you that haven't messed with much body work, I'll kind of go through quickly what's involved when you're spraying, when you're mixing. I have the tech sheets printed out for each of these. That'll give you your flash times, your cup life, all that stuff. But generally, I write the mixture on the top and what I'm mixing it with, just as a quick reference. But I'll have it on the sides of the cans as well. So 4-to-1 just means 4 parts this, 1 part that. To simplify that, you think if you use 4 ounces of this, you use 1 ounce of this. If you use 8 ounces of this, you use 2 ounces of this. That's your 4-to-1 ratio. The Select Seal is a 4-to-1 as well. Same exact mix as the primer. The base coat is a 1-to-1 mix. Just however much base coat you use the same amount of reducer. So I started off with 2 quarts of base coat, mixed 2 quarts of reducer. That gave me 1 full gallon of sprayable material. Now, I've painted, if you haven't been following the videos, I've already painted the whole bottom of the car. I did base coat, clear coat on the entire bottom of the car, and the entire engine bay, inside and outside of the engine bay, core support, all of that. Now yesterday I just did both door jambs, the door hinges, and the jambs of the doors themselves. And I only have, I'm gonna say about a pint left maybe. I'll pop this open real quick so you can see. So I'll definitely be buying more paint, which I knew I would be, but I wanted to get through the jambs. I've got just enough to be able to do the bottom of the hood and the bottom of the trunk. And then I'll buy some more paint. Whatever I have left of this, I'll mix together, and that'll give me the same mix to be able to do the entire outside of the car. That way I don't have any issues with match. So on the clear, the mix is a little odd on this one. It is a 2-to-1 to 20%. So here they got that on there. So two parts of the clear, 1 part of the hardener, and 20% reducer. So what I use to get these mixes, old school, we've used these style mixing sticks, but a lot of the newer manufacturers are using these percentages, and it throws you off a little bit. So these cups are great. So here is a mixing cup. Here, put it against the white background, make it a little easier to see. So there's that 2-to-1 to 1. So when I do the clear, that 2-to-1 to 20% that you see, so you figure out about how much material you want. So if I was gonna go up to the 7, I look at my 20%, that would be a full cup of material. You would bring your 2 parts, your clear up to this 7, and then your 1 part, your hardener up to this 7, and then your 20% to that 7. So it makes mixing pretty easy. So the actual process when I'm spraying, gotten my body work done on top of the epoxy primer. When that's done, your primer is going to cover your Bondo. So I use that's going to fill your sand marks. It's going to seal the Bondo down. I let it sit overnight, and then I'll sand it. I'll start with 320, and then I'll go to 400. And then after the primer's sealed and you're ready to paint, when everything's masked off, it's time for sealer. Now, what sealer does is it makes everything the same color. It fills in some of the minor scratches that you might have from your Bondo, from sanding your primer. Now, there's 2 ways you can do this. The tech sheet just calls for you can top coat it after 15 or 20 minutes, I think, once it's flashed off. So yesterday when I did the jams, what I did was I sprayed my sealer. About 15 minutes later, once I had my sealer gun cleaned up and was ready to spray base, I just went right into spraying base. Now, in between spraying sealer and base, I use a tack cloth. These things work great, and what that does is when your paint is dry, as you're, say, spraying over here, all that overspray is blowing around in the air, and it'll lay on these flat surfaces here. So while it's dry in between coats, you take that tack cloth and you can just lightly wipe down all this stuff, and it picks up all that overspray, any little fuzzies, any little dirt that might be floating around in the air, and that just makes for a nice clean job. So when I go to paint the body though, I do something a little different. I'll spray my sealer. I'll let the sealer sit overnight then, and I'll come back and I'll sand it. I'll dry sand it with a 500 grit on a 6-inch DA with a soft pad, which I'm not sure if I have it up here. No, I don't. 500 grit dry sandpaper DA, and that'll take any little fine scratches, any little nibs, any little bit of dirt. Again, I'm not in a professional paint booth, so I don't have the perfect downdraft setup. I'll sand that with the 500 grit, clean everything up, and then I'll start my base coat. That way I'm starting on a really nice smooth surface. Everything's ready to go. Generally with the chroma base, I do three coats. This color covers really good. It actually looks good after 2 coats. I definitely do 3 though to make sure everything's uniform. About 5 to 8 minutes in between each coat. Like yesterday, it was here in Pennsylvania, it was about 45, 55 degrees out, so it was a little chilly. So I did have heat running. What I do is my garage is laid out kind of interesting. On the other side of that door is my wife's garage bay. I'll run heat in there, and then I put a filter wall in that doorway. And there's my exhaust fan. I just put a filter in there, so it sucks all the warm air out of her garage through my bay. And I kept it pretty comfortable. I had it about 75 in here with about 50% humidity for a couple hours while I was spraying last night. So once your 3 coats of base are done, you get into your clear coat. I usually give it about a half an hour after the last coat of base before I start with the clear. Just make sure everything's good and cured. I'll scrub it real good with the tack cloth, make sure everything's clean, all my overspray's off. And then 2 medium wet coats of clear. Clear's a little trickier than base. If you've never sprayed before, the base goes on, I'd like to say fairly dry. I mean, it dries in a couple of minutes, where the clear stays sticky for a good 20 minutes or so. So when you're going around to do your second coat, you really got to be careful that you don't accidentally lean into something that you've already painted. Now, jambs are pretty easy. There's not much here, but when you're doing a quarter panel and a roof at the same time, you know, and you start at the roof and you work your way down, that's great for the first coat. But on the second coat, now you're working on the roof and you're leaning over all this. So you really got to be cautious of what you're doing and how you're moving, and make sure you got your clothes fitting pretty tight so you don't have a shirt draping off of you or anything. So that's material. Strainers. Usually anytime you buy paint, they'll ask if you need sticks and strainers. I always say yes, and you end up with a whole bunch of them. I think I've got a bunch in here too. So gun-wise, I've got a few different guns for a few different things. There's some other material there. So I've had this gun forever. I use it as my sealer gun, just an old Vilbus finish line gun. Has, I think it's a 1.6 tip on it. And then there's just a couple of primer guns down there for base coat. I have this AccuSpray. I love this gun. It's an HVLP. I've been using it for probably about 7 or 8 years now. I'm not sure what I'll replace it with when it finally craps out, but I just keep some notes on. I've cleared with it a couple times, but I don't like the way it clears. I only use it for base coat now. I just kind of keep some notes on how I have it set. And then for clear, I have Sada 4000. Usually I'll just use the aluminum cup on it, but if I'm in a tight space or I know I have to get upside down, I'll use one of these cups with the bag. These are nice because you can spray completely upside down, your paint doesn't leak, and the gun doesn't lose suction. Then some more cups, some more strainers, the rest of the material. Excuse the rest of the mess in here, but I got more Mustang parts laying around. They're everywhere. A bunch of stuff I've got to go through. More parts there. So I think that's about all I have today. The next step, I finished painting this stuff about 9 o'clock last night. It is now about 9 o'clock in the morning, so it's been about 12 hours since I painted everything. It's definitely dry to the touch, but it is not fully cured. Since I don't have the ability to bake the paint in here, it'll take about a month for the paint to fully cure. If you're doing this kind of paint work, you don't want to use any wax or any harsh chemicals or anything like that on your paint. So at least 30 days, that way it's fully cured. I'll probably wait until Monday or Tuesday now before I hang the doors back on the car. That'll be cured enough for what I'm doing. I can put some light tape on here. Little tip I've used is anytime you're taping on top of paint, when you take your masking tape, excuse this mess, they didn't run my sealer through the shaker before I had it delivered on Friday, and I was stirring it yesterday and made a hell of a mess when the stick broke. But what I'll do when I'm taping onto fresh paint is I'll take the tape, stretch out whatever length I need, and then I'll stick it to my shirt or stick it to my pants first and peel it off. And it takes some of them little fuzzies and stuff, and it probably reduces the adhesion about half on the tape. That way you're less of a chance of pulling on it. It's just less harsh. I don't know if it makes a difference. It's just one of those habits that somebody taught me and I've gotten into and I've always done. It's worked for me. I've never pulled any paint. So like I said, Monday or Tuesday, I'm going to put the doors back on. I'll mount the fenders, and then I can do my final block sanding of the outside of the fenders to the doors, have everything adjusted and fitted the way I want, and then I'll be ready to start painting. So what I have in the front shop here, this is the rest of my parts. Again, excuse the mess. I definitely need a bigger shop, but here's my wheels, the seats, a bunch of the trim. The fenders are ready for final block. Same with the hood. I got a couple parts that need some more work. The front and rear valance, some interior stuff, some hardware, and a bunch of leftover stuff. So once this car is done, I'll definitely be posting a lot of parts for sale that I didn't need. Hanging on to everything until the car is done, just because you never know. But that's where I'm at this weekend. I hope you guys are enjoying the videos, and look forward to posting some more. Thanks.